Okay, so we're picking up in the crash course in Jewish history, and in the last video, we came with a very easy way to remember 4,300 years of history, the basic breakdown. So let's review it right now. All you have to do is remember these numbers: 1,000, 1,000, 500, 1,000. It was 1,000 years from Adam to Noah, 1,000 years from Noah to Abraham. 500 years later, we get the Torah, and 1,000 years after that, we have all the books of the prophets and the writings. And then we have to remember these two numbers, 500 and 300. It was 500 years from the prophets and the writings until the Mishnah, which we're going to talk about more in depth later. And then 300 years later, we have the Talmud. And this is going to be right before the Middle Ages. So now in this video, what I want to focus on the first 2,000 years of human history, which predates Abraham, or Abraham's right at the very tail end of that. And even though this makes up the 4,300 years behind Jewish civilization, it is before really Abraham's on the scene, or really just at the very beginning of him being on the scene. So we're going to have to clarify why this is an important part to understanding our history and what we're all about. But I hope by the end of this video I've made it clear that we have to understand this, because it's key to understanding who Abraham is and what the Jewish people's destiny is all about. So let's get clear on what happened here. So we did cover this in the crash course in Torah, but let's review the four major events that occurred during this 2,000-year period. So as we know, God created the world in 6 days. On the sixth day, Adam was created. And then we have the story of him being placed in the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is an idyllic place. It's a little utopia. And Adam is placed there to work the garden and to protect it. And it's really a spiritual place. Everything, really, all his needs are taken care of there. He's told he can enjoy every fruit from every tree except for one, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The day he eats from that tree, he's told he will die, which means he won't literally die at that moment, but he'll become a species that will become immortal. Right after being told he can't eat from the tree, God says it's not good for man to be alone. He has man name the animals, and when he names the animals, he realizes that he doesn't have his own mate. He's put to sleep, and then God fashions from his bone Eve, and then the serpent comes along, gets Eve to eat from the tree. She feeds Adam, and they're cursed. The snake is cursed, the woman is cursed, and the land is cursed because of Adam. And he's told that he's going to be banished from the Garden of Eden. He is banished from the Garden of Eden to work the earth until he eventually dies and returns to the earth from which he came. So that's the story of man in the Garden of Eden. But really it's an issue of man understanding his place within the world. And even though almost all of it is given to him for him to enjoy, he has to realize there are boundaries and that he needs to be obedient to God, because ultimately God is the owner of the world and he sets the terms. So we have the banishment of Adam from the Garden of Eden. Then we have their two sons, Cain and Abel. Now, Cain was a farmer. Abel was a shepherd. They both bring offerings to God. Abel from the best of the livestock. Cain not from the best of the produce. God prefers Abel's more. Cain gets jealous and he ends up killing his brother Abel. And that's where we have the famous words when God comes to Cain and asks, "Where's his brother?" He answers, "Am I my brother's keeper?" So here we have a story of man sharing the world with another, the issues of jealousy between people, and eventually the issue of social responsibility. To what degree are we responsible for one another? Cain is cursed. He's going to become a wanderer over the face of the earth. Then 10 generations later, we have the story of the flood. Mankind had become morally corrupt. There was disrespect for personal property. There was rampant theft. There was intermingling of the species. God regrets having made the world. He decides he's going to bring a massive flood to wipe off everything that walks the face of the earth except for one man, Noack, his wife, their 3 sons, and their 3 wives, and representatives from all the different species that walk the planet will go into the ark, and when the flood waters come down, they'll sail off to see the second civilization of man. The flood lasted for an entire year. Eventually, they come out, they are blessed to reproduce once again and fill up the world, and then a few generations later, we have the story of the building of the Tower of Babel. Mankind together travels to a valley. It's called the Valley of Shinar, and there they come up with a plan to build a massive tower and a city that will reach the heavens. They'll make a name for themselves, and they'll never get scattered over the face of the earth. Now, the Torah relates that mankind only spoke one language. Our tradition is that it was Hebrew, and therefore there was tremendous potential for man to work together. But our understanding is that their plot was really to fight a war against God when they reach the heavens. God stops the building, and he scatters man, and we have the emergence of 70 different nations speaking 70 different languages, and measure for measure, because they use language to unite, language now becomes the source of their disunity, and mankind has lost the potential to work together towards a common good in total, until we have one more important ingredient, and that's going to be Abraham and his descendants, who are going to be key to helping the world rebuild its potential by reestablishing morality as the centerpiece of human endeavor. And we're going to focus more on that coming up. Now, as I mentioned, this 2,000-year period is before we get to the Jewish people's history. But it's important to realize that it's been always central to understanding what Abraham's all about and what the purpose of the Jewish people is about, and understanding what went wrong in this prehistory of the Jewish people. And it's very much a part of our consciousness. So it's not a disconnect. It's not something that happened before, but it's very important to understanding its centrality to what Jewish history is all about and what it's meant to achieve. Now, I want to show you something fascinating to understanding how connected Abraham was to Noah and to understanding everything that happened earlier in mankind's history. And I'm going to focus on the timeline now. So as we now know, Noah was a 10th generation descendant of Adam. Right? Of course, everybody was a direct descendant of Adam, but Noah was a 10th generation descendant. What a lot of people don't realize is that because Adam lived for a very long time, a grand total of 930 years, he got to live and see 9 generations of his descendants. So Lamech, who's Noah's father, knew Adam. So now to complete the picture, Noah was born in the year 2704 BCE, which means before the Common Era. And just to clarify, because we're going to be using this term a lot, we don't use BC because BC means before Christ. And we don't want to use him as our reference point for understanding our history. So we say before the Common Era. So Noah was born in the year 2704 before the Common Era. The flood occurs 600 years later in the year 2104, and we're going to be decreasing the numbers as we get close to the year 0 in the Common Era, which means Noah was 600 years old during the flood, and people lived for a very long time before the flood. It was only after the flood that man's lifespan was reduced to 120, which we discussed in the Crash Course in Torah. Then to continue with the picture, Abraham is a 10th generation descendant of Noah, is a 20th generation descendant of Adam. He was born in the year 1812 BC, which in the Jewish calendar was 1948. Curiously, 1948 when the state of Israel was established. In our calendar, it was 1948 in the Jewish calendar when Abraham was born. Then, this gets really interesting. During the Tower of Babel story, Abraham was 48 years old. That was in the year 1764 BC. So Abraham witnessed the building of the Tower of Babel and the disintegration of mankind and splintering into all these different nations, 70 different nations in total. And now for the grand finale, Noah dies when Abraham is 58. That was in the year 1754, which means Abraham knew Noah. He got to learn all about life before the flood. Noah knew his grandfather Methuselah, who lived for a long, long time and lived for century upon centuries with Adam. So it was only 4 generations from Abraham to Noah, Noah to Methuselah, Methuselah to Adam, which means Abraham got a great understanding of the world before his arrival. And therefore, that's going to impact his sense of what life is all about back to the very beginning. And therefore, it's going to be key to understanding his mission in the world and obviously the Jewish people's mission and our destiny as a result. That's why this period of history is key as an introduction to understanding Abraham and the Jewish people's history that's about to begin in the next video. So let's do a little review of what we've done up until now. There was a lot in this video, so let's get it clear. We have the 2,000 years from Adam all the way to Abraham. 4 key events. Man in the Garden of Eden, living in the idyllic world which he lost. The story of Cain and Abel, the issue of sharing the world with others and social responsibility. The story of the flood and the realization that the impact of sin in the world and immorality can impact man's place in the world and physical destruction. And the Tower of Babel, the fact that mankind tried to unite for an evil purpose, unfortunately, and the loss, therefore, of mankind's potential to work together for a common good because they can no longer communicate and truly understand each other until hopefully someone emerges, which we're going to see with that being Abraham and his descendants, who are going to be key to helping mankind achieve what was initially meant with the very creation of the world. Then to get the timeline straight, Noah was a 10th generation descendant of Adam who had lived for 930 years. He was born in the year 2704 BCE. The flood occurs 600 years later in 2104. Abraham is a 20th generation descendant of Adam. He was born in the year 1812 BCE. The Tower of Babel occurs when Abraham is 48 years old. That's in 1764. And Noah dies 10 years later when Abraham is 58 in the year 1754.